What if you woke up one day and noticed that certain events are occurring at precisely the same time every day? However, your girlfriend thinks that you're crazy for thinking this. But are you truly crazy, or could the universe be trying to warn you of something terrible that is about to happen? Welcome to What a Story. At the start of the story, a man is seen carrying a gun while walking through New York's Grand Central Station. Upon seeing the gun, the people in the area quickly flee. The armed man approaches another man who appears to be guarding a girl, and they both aim their guns at each other before being stopped by security. The camera then shifts to a clock displaying the time as 2:22, before gunshots are heard. However, it is revealed that this was just a dream experienced by Dylan, who wakes up and continues with his daily routine, including listening to the news. The news discusses a star named Hamlin, that perished 30 years ago, but its light is only reaching Earth now, and it is predicted that this supernova will have consequences for Earth and its inhabitants. Dylan is seen biking to work and heading to Grand Central Station to catch a train. He is an air traffic controller with a strong ability to visualize patterns. Later, after work, he goes to a club with his colleagues, drinks, and receives a ticket to an aerial ballet as a gift for his upcoming birthday. The next day at work, he begins to see constellation patterns in front of him, and experiences hallucinations about a recurring dream, making it impossible for him to communicate with aircraft. He checks the clock and realizes that it is exactly 2:22. Upon inspecting the clock, he realizes that it has stopped. Dylan snaps out of his daze, only after his colleagues call out to him. He notices that two planes are on course to collide due to his inattention, but he quickly communicates with the pilots and prevents a disaster. The passengers on board are grateful for his quick action. He notices that the clock has resumed functioning after the incident. However, due to his mistake, he is suspended for 4 weeks. The day after his suspension, he attends an aerial ballet, where he becomes captivated by a woman named Sarah, who takes his breath away with her beauty. After the performance ends, they attend an after-party, and Dylan approaches Sarah and introduces himself. They decide to go to a restaurant and strike up a conversation. Dylan shares with Sarah that his father was a pilot, and he too aspired to be one, but his fear of flying prevented him from pursuing his dream. Sarah discloses that she is employed at the Howard Pace Art Gallery. Dylan also confides in her about his work suspension, and to his surprise, Sarah reveals that she was a passenger on the plane that almost collided with another plane, at precisely 2:22 p.m. While Dylan feels remorseful for the incident, Sarah expresses gratitude towards him for saving her life. As they part ways, they both confess that they felt an intense connection on their first date, as if they had known each other for a lifetime. The next day, Dylan observes familiar occurrences on his route to Grand Central, including a siren, a woman's laughter, construction noises, a man offering assistance, and the sound of breaking glass. Upon reaching the Grand Central Station at precisely 2:21 p.m., Dylan sees a man reading a newspaper, a couple embracing, a line of preschool children, with the last one dropping something, and a pregnant woman standing under the clock. Suddenly, at exactly 2:22 p.m., the window of the station breaks. Afterwards, Dylan invites Sarah to an early dinner, and the two go to Central Park for ice cream. Sarah confides that she had stopped dancing because of an injury, which makes Dylan feel sorry for her. To lift her spirits, he plays a song, and begins dancing in front of her. She joins in, and the pair dance joyfully amid a bustling park. Eventually, they share a romantic moment by kissing. They return to Dylan's place, where they engaged in physical intimacy. The following morning, they snuggle on the bed, and Dylan inquires about the origin of Sarah's necklace, which she reveals was a gift from her ex-partner, Jonas, who is also the primary artist at the gallery where she works. While conversing, they discover they were both born on April 18, 1986, and are turning 30 in less than a week. Suddenly, Dylan hears a car collision from the street below his apartment, at precisely 9:15 a.m., and he informs Sarah that it's the third time in a row that the same incident had happened. Afterwards, Dylan hails a taxi to head towards Grand Central. However, when the driver takes a shorter path, Dylan requests him to halt the vehicle, when he hears the familiar sounds of a siren, a woman's laughter, construction noise, and a man asking for help. This prompts Dylan to shout for the cab to stop, angering the driver.
It's okay.
At that moment, a different vehicle collides, shattering the taxi's glass windows. Despite sustaining injuries, Dylan heads to Grand Central Station and observes similar occurrences. He notices a businessman reading a newspaper, an elderly couple embracing, a line of children walking, and a pregnant woman standing beneath the clock. Dylan informs Sarah about these repetitive patterns, but she doubts him. Nonetheless, she helps him tend to his wounds caused by the car accident. Dylan returns home and records all the events during his day, starting from 9:10 a.m. He begins by describing a water droplet, followed by a dying insect, and an airplane passing overhead. The next day, Dylan ascends to the rooftop of his apartment to see if the pattern recurs. He anticipates the water droplet from the previous day, but the sky remains clear. At precisely 9:10, a droplet falls onto his notebook, causing him to be taken aback. He quickly shuts the notebook, and upon reopening it, he discovers a squished bug on the page. An airplane passes overhead, and Dylan can hardly believe that the same sequence of events has occurred again. Dylan visits the gallery searching for Sarah, and discovers that the main exhibit features artwork by Jonas, Sarah's former boyfriend. Jonas has crafted a holographic display of the Grand Central Station that mirrors the events Dylan has experienced over the past few days, such as a businessman reading his paper, a couple embracing, a row of young children, and a pregnant woman standing beneath the clocks. Dylan believes that Jonas is following him, as he hasn't shared this information with anyone else. This leads to a physical altercation between the two of them, during which Dylan confronts Jonas and asks if he has been stalking him. Present in the audience is the owner of the Kiefer Gallery, who praises Jonas for his brilliant portrayal of the murder that occurred in the Grand Central Station 30 years ago. Sarah regrets Dylan's outburst towards Jonas, and decides to pause her relationship with Dylan. Later that day, Dylan reaches out to Sarah via text, pleading for her forgiveness. During this time, Dylan discovers a bundle of letters concealed in his home. He soon realizes that a man named Jake Redman had composed these letters for a woman named Evelyn. After delving deeper, Dylan learns that Jake Redmond resided in his apartment in 1987, precisely 30 years ago. He stumbles upon an article online, shedding light on the murder that transpired 3 decades ago at Grand Central Station. To his shock, he discovers that Jake Redmond was the culprit, who killed both his lover, Evelyn, and a police officer at precisely 2:22. Furthermore, Dylan learns that Evelyn was pregnant at the time of her murder. Jake killed Evelyn out of jealousy because she was in love with the police officer, Noah Marks, whom Jake also killed that day. Dylan also discovers that he, Sarah, Jake, and Evelyn share the same birthday. Dylan begins to make connections and realizes that he and Sarah are the reincarnated versions of Jake and Evelyn. After discovering Evelyn's address in the letters, Dylan visits her home and meets her sister, who expresses her belief that Jake did not murder Evelyn out of jealousy, as she loved him deeply. Additionally, she reveals that Noah, the police officer, was also in love with Evelyn. Upon returning home, Dylan connects the dots and realizes that the current situation with himself, Sarah, and Jonas is similar to what occurred 30 years ago with Jake, Evelyn, and Noah. The return of the constellation has brought back the fate of the characters. Dylan reaches out to Sarah and urges her to meet him after witnessing strange occurrences. Meanwhile, Sarah is at an art gallery admiring Jonas's holograms when Dylan's message reaches her. Sarah informs Jonas about Dylan's discoveries, but Jonas dismisses them as mere hallucinations. Later, Sarah visits Dylan in his apartment and finds him upset. Dylan reveals to her his fear of potentially harming her on their upcoming birthday, much like Jake did to Evelyn.
Go.
He tells Sarah to leave him and never see him again for their own safety. After Sarah departs, Dylan loses his composure and starts destroying his belongings. He contemplates jumping off the terrace but ultimately decides against it. Sarah visits Jonas at his office and recounts all the events that took place. Jonas proposes taking her on vacation to help take her mind off Dylan. The next day, Dylan realizes that all the occurrences in the sequence had previously happened to Jake on the day he passed away. The sequence was attempting to alert Dylan that Sarah was in jeopardy. Upon comprehending this, Dylan rushes to save her, but despite multiple attempts, he cannot reach her on the phone. He goes to Jonas's office where he is taken aback to find a wall decorated with photographs of Sarah and various holograms of her. He realizes that Jonas is obsessed with Sarah. He also finds an empty gun case and knows Sarah is in danger. He rushes to the station to find her. Meanwhile, Jonas and Sarah are buying the tickets at the Grand Central Station. Jonas tells Sarah to wait for him under the clock. History is repeating itself. Jonas returns to her with the tickets. Sarah tells him that she cannot go with him because she is in love with Dylan. Upset, he implores Sarah to confess her love for him, but Sarah declines, and at that moment, Dylan shows up at the station. Jonas, presuming that Sarah had summoned Dylan, becomes furious and advances toward Dylan brandishing a gun. Sarah starts to observe the same individuals Dylan recounted, such as the businessperson, the embracing couple, the children, and so on. She gradually comprehends that everything that Dylan had disclosed was factual. Jonas initially aims his firearm at Dylan, but then he turns towards Sarah, stating that if he cannot have her, neither can Dylan. Just in time, Dylan steps in front of Sarah, shielding her, but he gets hit by a bullet. The incident from 3 decades ago repeats itself, and at precisely 2:22 p.m., the police shoot Jonas. Dylan falls into Sarah's embrace. Fortunately, he survives the ordeal. Sarah then glances at the clock, revealing that it is 2:23 p.m. They have survived, and destiny has changed. Eventually, we learn that even in their past lives, police officer Noah was responsible for killing Evelyn and Jake, but the authorities had distorted the narrative to protect their reputation. The dying star, Hamlin, mentioned earlier in the story, ultimately vanishes, but a new star emerges immediately after. In the final scene, Dylan and Sarah live happily, with Dylan having conquered his fear of flying and becoming a pilot, while Sarah lovingly gazes at their infant in the cradle. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.